varieties in the summer, growing varieties in the certain varieties in the summer months and growing different varieties in the winter months. It's gotten to the point where, I mean, I grow winter vegetables and summer vegetables all the time because I don't know what the weather is going to be. So I just started planting broccoli and cauliflower, hoping that in 2 months it's going to be cold and rainy. It might not, but that's safe. And at the same time, I'm planting eggplant, chili peppers, and Irish potatoes, and all of different crops that I need because I don't know what the weather is going to be like. And even if I lose 50% of my crop, I still have a lot of stuff to eat. So I think this is the important thing to do. And it seems like we need to spend more time developing our own varieties specifically for Molokai, or at least screening varieties. And what I tell a lot of gardeners is plant maybe 3 different varieties of a crop, like 3 different varieties of broccoli or 3 different varieties of cauliflower, and look at which ones do the best for you. And then keep on improving in terms of the most adapted varieties for your area. Next.
The other thing that I wanted to add here is that a lot of the varieties that are developed on the mainland are using Hawaii varieties as a base because we are resistant to many things. The other thing is Glenn was talking about sometimes he has to, he plants, but the crop may not make it. I want to encourage you guys to compost. And I also want to encourage you, if you're doing vermicomposting, to feed the leafy greens and many of those fruits and vegetables to the worms, because I know we have had a workshop on the worms.
I think composting is really important because what we found in the last couple of years is that the water, the plants are just sucking up water at such an unreal rate. We used to use 2 acre inches as the average amount of water that the plants need every week. And this relates to evaporation, how much water it evaporates, and also how much the plants need. About a couple of years ago, we're up to 3 acre inches a week. So that equates to about 80-something thousand gallons per acre, which is phenomenal. The only way you're going to cut down on the water needs of the plant is through composting. It's not going to happen through plastic mulch. It's not going to happen any other way except by composting and mulching. So this is a heat tolerant lettuce, Sierra. I think it's super heat tolerant. I've tried to cross it with other varieties, but it just takes a whole long time to bolt. And so it doesn't seed. It just seeded last month. And then I wasn't paying attention and most of the seeds blew away. But it finished like a month after everything else seeded. It's so heat tolerant. So this is one of them. Next. This is another variety called Hilo Green. This is developed by Russell Nagata in Hilo. Russell was the former lettuce breeder at the University of Florida. And I've been working with him a lot, sending him different varieties to cross for me. But this Hilo Green is really heat tolerant. Manoa lettuce is not heat tolerant. At one time it was, and one of the breeders at UH created a head because in the market, the Manoa lettuce was falling apart. The leafy type Manoa lettuce was falling apart. So he bred it into a head. And when he did that, he brought in the tip burn. So you have Manoa lettuce with a lot of tip burn. It's a real problem right now. And we're trying to improve on Manoa lettuce to make it heat tolerant again. Next. So why do we save seeds? We're losing hundreds of varieties that were grown, say, the early 1900s, because people didn't save the seeds. And we get complacent and we get comfortable just buying seeds from seed companies. And some of those seeds are not really good. What happens a lot of times is the seed companies will just grow a crop and just harvest it all. They'll harvest the junk ones, they'll harvest the good ones, and you almost lose the variety after a while. Instead of going in there, growing it, and taking out all the ones that don't look like that watermelon, and have a variety that looks like Crimson Sweet. They want to harvest volume, and they harvest everything, and you got junk stuff mixed up with good stuff. And pretty soon that whole gene pool goes down the drain. The seed companies are focused on making money. And the easiest way they can make money is just to sell a few of the best varieties and do away with the rest. And for us in Hawaii, we find varieties that are good for us, and then pretty soon we can't get it. We have a variety called Southern Comet that does broccoli that does really good on Molokai. And Taki Seed Company is not going to grow it anymore. Manoa lettuce is another one. Manoa lettuce is actually grown in Japan by Taki Seed, and they're not going to grow it anymore. So even UH is looking around for the seeds. We used to have this cabbage that grew on Maui called Tasty. It was the tastiest variety. It's not made anymore. So we have these situations where nobody's growing for us. They're growing for this big worldwide market, and Hawaii is like a speck on a fly on the back of an elephant. We're so insignificant, it really doesn't matter. And so we need to be developing our own varieties for our specific conditions. Next. Seed sovereignty is something that a lot of people talk about, and a lot of times we don't understand, but we need to control our seed and our food. If only certain seeds are available, we're forced to buy those seeds. So one way is to actually grow your own and develop varieties for your specific location. And a lot of times, this is not that hard to do. You grow it in every season, and you take the best plants. And after a while, you have a plant that is way superior from the one you started from. For organic farmers, this is really important because if they have GMO contaminated seed, they would lose their organic certification. And this happened recently. Well, a similar situation happened recently, I say about 3 or 4 years ago, with Molokai organic papayas. Somebody in Washington, a teacher in Washington, was using his test kit to test whether certain crops were GMO. And they tested a Hawaii papaya. We don't know if it was from Molokai. We suspect that it was. And it came out contaminated with GMO. The problem was the test was faulty and not the papaya. But just think what it did to the market. People stopped buying the papaya, and the farmers really, really lost out. So, yeah, all kind of things can happen in this area, and all of a sudden the farmers are not selling their produce. Next. So seeds are becoming expensive. These are some seeds sold by Johnny Seeds, and most of them are over $1 a seed. I mean, you can grow a whole bunch of seeds. I mean, I just harvested some lettuce seeds. 1 ounce of lettuce seed is somewhere between 18,000 and 35,000 seeds. 1 ounce. I mean, that's more than we can use on this island. Okay, this is good. No, this is good. So look at the cost. Okay, part of growing seeds is understanding your crop and being able to grow the crop beyond the time that you harvest it, because you're going to grow it for seed. You need to grow it a little bit longer. You need to know your crop's likes and dislikes. Some crops don't like winter months. Some crops don't like the hot summer. Right now, I'm growing some pole beans, and they don't like the weather. And right next to it is long beans and wing beans, and they're going crazy. So knowing the best time to grow the crop is important. When you know where the crop comes from, it gives you an idea of what kind of weather the crop likes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this later. Knowing the nutritional needs of your crop, what kind of fertilizer it needs, how much it needs. Some crops have special needs. Some crops are really hard to grow. You're going to have to baby them a lot. And for me, I don't like to baby crops. I like to grow stuff that is really resilient and adapted to my farm. Okay. Knowing what the crop is resistant to. And disease resistance is really important in Hawaii because it's too costly to control diseases. And Hawaii has been on the cutting edge of developing disease-resistant varieties for over 60 years. And we have a lot of resistant varieties. It's good to know the pests that affect your crop. This winter with the cold weather, we had insects that I've never seen before. They came out in January through March. Okay, next.
Glenn, right quick, if you'll look at our text, we have a question. Oh, sorry, it's just to me. How long is the life of saving youth seeds?
Okay, that's a good question. Um, in around 2018, somebody found a can of Manoa lettuce at UH, at one of the reefers at UH.
Okay.
The seed was from 1977. They opened the can and it was almost 100% germination.
Wow.
So that seed was harvested before 1977 and it was still good. I have some seeds, eggplants that are about 18 years old. So it really depends on how well you harvest, you dry it down, and you refrigerate it. And the seeds can last. I mean, a lot of seeds can last over 10 years. I need to go through our reefer right now because some seeds are still good and others are not as good. And it all comes down to seed drying and when you save the seed. So the seeds are totally mature. They're washed well, they're dried well, and they're refrigerated, and seeds can last a long time. These are the centers of origin of all the crops that we eat and grow. Vavilov was a Russian botanist who went all over the world and collected the different crops, and these are different regions. So, like number one, that's Mexico. You got corn and tomatoes and squashes and all this kind of stuff. And so all these different areas are the origins of different crops. So certain areas, such as the Mediterranean, those crops like a hot day and a cold night. And we don't have that weather in Hawaii. We have hot days and warm nights. So some of these crops will not do well in Hawaii at certain times of the year. They'll probably do well in the winter months, but not in the summer months. So knowing their centers of origin will help you to determine what will grow well at certain times of the year. So in the number 8 area, that's China. You got all kinds of stuff out of that area. You have stuff like all the Chinese cabbages, pak choi, kailan, choy sum, all those types of produce, as well as the citruses and a bunch of other stuff. But I have a whole class on these centers of origin to kind of so you can understand where our different crops come from. Taro would come from that 7A is from where taro comes from, as well as sweet potatoes and bananas all come from that area. Okay, next. So part of growing seed is understanding your crop. And a lot of people don't understand their crops. This is the different stages of taro. I have people telling me, I think my taro's ready. I said, why? Oh, it's 6 feet tall. I said, no, it's only halfway. It has to drop all the way back down until you have this large corn being developed. So understanding your crop cycle is really important. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, next. This is a really important area, growing seedlings. And a lot of gardeners have a really difficult time growing seedlings. They usually plant the seeds too deep. Maybe they let it dry up too much or they overwater. But this is a really important area for both farmers and gardeners. Last year, we mentioned crossed to a red tomato called Komohana. And the seedlings came out all different colors, orange, yellow, red, green, half purple, half yellow, half purple, half red. And a lot of them had problems in this seedling stage. They said, oh, none of my seeds came out. Must be something wrong with the seeds. I said, no, there is nothing wrong with the seeds. I did a germination test. It was 100% germination rate. And so what happened was some of them had the seedling trays on the ground, and the slugs ate them, and the snails ate them, and the birds ate them. And he had all these different problems. And he said, oh, yeah, I think that's what happened. I saw the slug trails all around. I said, you have to put your seedlings on a table. You need to water them regularly. You need to watch. And I think Kilia was one of them on this project. And Kilia had some of those colored tomatoes coming out in her garden out of this program. But we were able to when we first started the program, we had 70 people signed up. And I told the team, this is too many people. We cannot handle this. So the next week we had a mandatory workshop. We had 39 people showed up and we ran with the 39. And now we're getting requests from every island to do this program again. And we're still thinking about whether we might do it. We might do it with peas next year, maybe snow peas or snap peas. Next.
Glenn,
So yeah,
before we move on, for those who don't grow many seeds, they just do transplants. I just wanted to point out the difference between the true leaves and the cotyledon leaves on these particular plants. So for anybody who's not familiar, you usually don't transplant until you see the first set or the second set of true leaves. And so those true leaves are the ones that actually look like the leaves that we identify a plant by. So if you look on the left-hand side of this photo, you can see some little almost heart-shaped leaves. Those are the cotyledon leaves, or the baby seed leaves, where you really can't tell what plant you planted when they first come up, but it's that second set of leaves that looks more like leafy green type leaves there, that are your true leaves. And that's when you can start considering transplanting.
yeah. And so on the left, okay, yes, fast.
Oh, I can go back.
On the left, that's a pak choi, and on the right is this red manoa, actually called manoa leopard, that is a red striped manoa lettuce. Next. So we have a lot of diseases in Hawaii, and that's inherent in the tropics. Diseases come in on plants, they come in on insects, they come in with plants that people are carrying with them. They come to Molokai on plants that people carry with them. So this is tomato yellow leaf curl virus, really bad on tomatoes. Fortunately, I haven't seen it on Molokai. It's really bad on Oahu, Maui, Big Island. And if you don't have a resistant variety to this disease, you cannot grow this crop. So, I've been working with Oregon State and also breeders in Minnesota to develop yellow leaf curl virus resistant varieties to kind of stay on the cutting edge. So when the disease comes to Molokai, we already have resistant varieties. When it first came to Hawaii, I already had disease resistant varieties from Israel that I had in my reefer, waiting for this disease to arrive. And I was able to give those seeds to the extension agents on Oahu who were conducting trials to identify disease resistant varieties. Next. So this is a major problem in pineapple soils, and most of where we farm in Honolulu are pineapple soils, the red soils. And this is a swelling of the roots caused by microscopic eelworms. And what they'll do is they'll feed on the roots and they'll swell up the roots, and the plants cannot take up water. And a lot of our crops are susceptible to this. Probably the worst ones would be eggplant and okra. And if you pull your eggplant and okra out, you'll see these. Next.
Wow.
So we have 3 different species of nematodes in Hawaii. The Javanica strain is the worst, and that's the prevalent variety on Molokai. Crop rotation is critical, okay? If you're gonna plant a susceptible crop, you need to plant a resistant crop before you plant the susceptible crop. So one way would be to plant sun hemp, and then you plant your susceptible crop. Or you can plant nematode resistant crops. We have a lot of varieties of tomato. A lot of the Hawaii lines, such as Anahu, Healani, are resistant to nematodes. The Manoa Wonder pole beans, also the Paumoho pole beans and Kahala soybean are also resistant. And the sweet corns are also resistant. So crop rotation is critical because you can get a really, a big buildup of nematodes. And human nature is such where, if the plant grew really good over there, I think I'll plant it again. And that is not the way to do it. You need to plant resistant varieties followed by non-resistant varieties. Okay, next. And this is really important, okay? the severity of most diseases can be reduced by proper nutrition. So if the plants are healthy, they can weather the storm in a lot of situations. But some diseases are just really bad that there's no way they're gonna even get to fruiting. So making sure you have soil samples, making sure you're following the soil sample, making sure you're building up your soil, your organic matter. The target that we use for organic matter is about 5%. And 5% equates into 100,000 pounds of organic matter per acre. And that's not something you're going to do overnight. You build every season. And it equates to 2.5 pounds per square foot of organic matter. So that kind of gives you an idea of how much you need on the ground in your plants. And as you're putting them down, they're burning up. So it's almost like you can put 100,000 pounds down, but in a couple months, you're not going to have 100,000 pounds over there. It'll disappear. Okay, next. This is a poster on the side of the highway in New York. I had a daughter was living over there. We should drive past this all the time. Eat real food, okay? And the thing about it is, if your soil is lacking in certain nutrients, the food that you harvest from that soil is going to be lacking in those nutrients. So if the soil is low in calcium, the food that you grow in there is going to be deficient in calcium. Same thing with magnesium, potassium, and all this stuff. So it's really important that your soil is in top shape. So the food that comes out of that is going to be full of nutrients. Next. So what do you need to know about your soil? One is you need to know the soil series. We have over 160 different soils in Hawaii, more than any place else in the world. Okay. You need to know the pH. The pH is really important because the pH level needs to be somewhere between 5.5 and 6.5. If it's below 5, most crops cannot handle, and there's nutrients in the soil that are toxic to the plants, namely aluminum and manganese will actually kill the plants because the pH is too low. So you need to be able to move it up to at least 6. I try to make it even higher than that because a lot of times what we're adding is driving it back down. A lot of fertilizer we add will drive it back down. So I try to start high at about 6.5. Certain crops like it even higher, such as lettuce. Lettuce likes it. Lettuce and green onion like it a little bit higher. And I talked about organic matter. And then key nutrients. The most important ones are NPK and calcium. You need to have these in good supply. For some strange reason, holy hua is really high in potassium. And that's a really important nutrient. This is what gives you the sweetness in the taro, in the bananas, in the papayas, and a lot of different crops. I was just talking to a farmer on Kauai on Saturday, an old friend of mine. And he said, oh, if you want sweet papaya, you got to have the potassium. I said, man, our soil is like, got excess potassium. He said, oh, you guys lucky, Again, knowing about your crop history, what you planted there a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, will tell you, okay, how much nutrients did I take out of the soil, or did I just totally deplete the soil? And then the crop rotation history of being able to build up your soil and having your soil in really good condition. Next. So this is the soil map of Molokai. So the red, good they made it red, but the red is the red soils, the holy hua red soils. So you see it a lot on holy hua as well as West End, or Mauna Loa, down to even Kaluakoi until you hit the sandy areas. Then we have a little bit of this black soil down La'au Point and a little bit on the edge of holy hua. And this is probably the richest soil that you can get. It's called Montmorillonite. And I think where and Bahana Nursery, that area has some of that soil. And that soil is really rich. In the soils of holy hua, calcium is always in short supply. So you usually have to use lime, or you have to use dolomite to build up your soil. So this is the area. You need to kind of know your soil, then you know what the soil needs. Okay, next. So this is one of the Holy Horse soils. So this soil is from Walter Rollins' family house east. From there east, so that's Colea Road. I think that's Colea Road. From Colea Road east, this is Lahaina series. So all the Ala roads, all up where Kilia, you're actually out of one. You got different soil, but from the high school all the way down to the Rollins residence is all this Lahaina series. Below that area is called the Molokai series. I think to me it's a better soil than Lahaina. I farmed on both of them. In the gulches, we have another soil called Holy Horse soil. And it's a rich soil because all the good soil goes into the gulch after the heavy rains. So it's a finer soil and it's a richer soil. And then down at the Ag Park, we have Holomoa series, we have Waikani series as we go farther down. Okay, next. So these are some soil generalizations, okay? The older the soil, the more nutrient depletion. So on the Kauai is the oldest island. It has the oldest soils. A lot of the areas, especially the high rainfall areas, Waialeale is 500 inches a year. Some of these areas, the soil is really depleted. In the higher rainfall areas, some of your important bases, calcium, magnesium, potassium, are leached. So up in Kalai, areas like that, maybe up in Halava Valley, a lot of these areas are more depleted. And so when you know this, you can put these type of nutrients in your land. Lower rainfall, usually richer soil. So you have areas such as Kalamaula, Kaluakoi, and the soil is fairly rich. Okay, the parent material determines the nutrient content. We have different soils that came from different eruptions from different mountains, and they're all slightly different. The hotter eruptions, a lot of the nutrients went up in smoke. In the more cooler eruptions, where it moved slowly, where the lava moves slowly, it's a richer soils. Okay, and then steep areas got more runoff. You lose more of a good soil. The lowland areas and the pockets have richer soil. So even on your homestead, you can have areas that are richer and some areas that are not as rich. Okay, high wind is a big problem in Holihua. The soil was blowing away, so you need to look at covering your crop. You need to look at windbreaks. Okay, next. So building organic matter can take many forms. This is weed eating guinea grass and using it to build up your soil and using it kind of like a rotation. So I'll plant and slowly move into the guinea grass and plant into this area. When you have a lot of organic matter, you need to add nitrogen, because nitrogen feeds the microbes that break down the organic matter. And if you don't put nitrogen, the nitrogen will steal it from the plants. And so a lot of people told me, oh man, I put all this mulch around my plants and the plants are all yellow. I said, yeah, because the microbes are stealing the nitrogen from your plants in order to break down the organic matter. So anytime you use a lot of organic matter, you need to go in with nitrogen, and it can be a lot of different forms. You can use urea, you can use blood meal, you can use fish emulsion, things like that. Okay, next. So this is really important. If you know your pH and you want to know how to adjust the pH, this is a real important slide. Okay, so if you want to increase your pH and your calcium and magnesium is low, use dolomite. Dolomite of all of these is probably the most expensive. So I only use it when I really need it. So gypsum, if your pH is good, you can go in with gypsum and you add calcium, but it doesn't change the pH. Okay. Ground coral, which is probably the most common pH adjustment that we use, increases pH and calcium both. If you wanted to just get a little bit of coral, you can go down and grab some sand. What I usually do is I put the sand in a base of the hibachi, and you burn the sand and the sand will break down faster. If you just use sand and the sand is a grainy sand, it's going to take a long time to break it down. So you can use the charcoal and the coral, the ground coral or the sand, and throw it in the garden. And then you have other sources. We have biochar or PE shells. Biochar has a good amount of calcium in it, but it also has other properties such as a bank for other nutrients, and then also aerating the soil. Next. So climate change, we deal with climate change. I cannot believe the kind of downpours we've been having. When you start getting 5 inches overnight in Hollywood, you can just go to the weather service and see the maps and say, okay, we got some trouble coming. What's been happening, especially, now, is that we have hotter days and colder nights. Last night was pretty cool. And so the plants will respond to this. For summertime, like tomatoes like hot days and they like cold nights. They actually fruit and flower better. Other crops might not adjust to that. So we're getting more of this kind of extremes. Unseasonable weather, heavy rain in summertime, heavy runoff. And this is aggravated by the deer problem. We don't have the cover on the ground. The deer are kind of, raising hell on this island, and all this dirt is going into the ocean, never to be used again. And then droughts in winter that we had this year. We had January to March with no rain, which has never happened before. Okay. And we end up with insect flare-ups. And what happens a lot of times is the weather is too cold, and then the bad guys explode. And we see this in the leaf roller, the insect, the banana skipper. You see it in the wintertime, they roll up all the leaves because the natural enemy dies back because they don't like that cold weather. So we see that also with hornworms, sweet potato hornworms, and other hornworms that came up. So and then we have plants that start adapting to this weather. So we have this bull thistle that coming into Hollywood with this beautiful flower. We also have milkweed coming in with these, they call it balloon plant that is coming into Hollywood. So with the weather change, they're starting to come in. Okay, next. So this is the West End on a bad day. This is coming out of Kaka'ako River. And just imagine how much soil is lost. Okay, next. This is Ranch Momomi. And you can see this was westerly winds and just like wiping out a lot of our fisheries habitat. Okay, next. This is Palo Alto Helena. I got slides that are even worse than this. Next. So that is the end of our presentation. Lucky Ho stayed within 1 hour. If you have any questions, this is our emails. You can send us our email if you have any questions about the presentation, and we can send you information. Any questions? All right, I see somebody from Honoka School and then other from other places. So